All right, kia ora everyone, and welcome to episode number 5 of Digital Footprints, a podcast by BIMinNZ. I'm your host, Jake Nash, and joining me today is an awesome pair of guests. That's right, it's our first three-way conversation on the podcast. Today I'm joined by Melanie Tristram, who is the Principal Digital Delivery Lead at Jazzmax, and Glenn Jowett, who is the Technical Director and Digital Advisory at Becca. In this episode today, Mel and Glenn tell me all about their early involvement with the BIM Acceleration Committee and what would ultimately become BIMinNZ. They talk about their early days of the inception and development and rollout of the New Zealand BIM handbook, as well as other things like the value case for digital first and what would ultimately culminate in a 2019 BIMinNZ conference. They share their stories about the ups and downs of working in this space and ultimately why they decided to hand it over to a new group. So I really enjoyed my conversation with Mel and Glenn, and I hope you do as well. Cheers.
Yep, all good here.
You got a full mic setup there, huh?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Professional setup, man.
Funnily enough, not for this. In a previous life, I recorded a lot of training videos, and having a mic on an arm like this just means it doesn't pick up the tracking of your mouse.
Yeah, okay.
And I just became immediately useful for this now, and I'll have to record lectures and stuff as well. So it's actually pretty handy. But yeah, how was your break?
It was good.
It's good.
Went over to Bali, so had family down for Christmas. Went out to Bali New Year's Eve. Spent 10 days over there. Sunshine.
What's Bali like on New Year's? I imagine it's...
Well, we didn't spend New Year's Eve there. We had this grand plan, which Air New Zealand kind of ruined for us. We had this grand plan to spend New Year's Eve business class, flying to Bali.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And they moved the flight time, so we were supposed to be doing New Year's Eve in the air. And we ended up landing at like 8 p.m. New Year's Eve and crashing. So didn't even see midnight.
Yeah, no, I've been to Bali once, and it was for like a family member's 40th, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm quite a recluse, so I spend 3 days with them, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go to Sanur or something for like 4 days, and I'll see you in a week. And it's the kind of place where you can just do that. You can just book where you're going to stay the first night and nothing else, and then just kind of wing it from there, which I always found a lot of fun. How was your break? Mel, did you get away?
Only 4 days up to Northland, up to Kerikeri. The rest of the break was spent relaxing and recovering from last year.
Yeah,
Preparation for this fun.
Yeah. I've got an aunt that lives in Kerikeri, so I haven't spent much time there, but I did stop in and check it out earlier this year in March.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, it's a nice spot.
Yeah, a little wee country town, and headed over to Russell on the foot ferry with my youngest, so that was good. Fish and chips on the beach.
We spent a night in Russell as well. It was smaller and more kind of quaint than I was imagining. I thought it was going to be like the larger place that we could stop off where, we could do a few things, but it was just like every other little town in Northland. It was actually really pretty, but we didn't get to spend much time there, and we came in when it was dark, so across the ferry. But yeah. Hey, well, look, thank you guys for both joining us. This is our first duo, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I like that the layout's just automatically corrected itself, so that's a good start. I thought I would take a moment to kind of just introduce you both and hear a little bit about how you came to be in the roles that you are, and then we'll kind of move into sort of the crux of this episode, which is really about the origin of BIMinNZ. But Mel, perhaps we start with you. We did a community spotlight on Mike Foy at the end of last year that's on our website, and through that I learned that you were connected to Jazzmax through a barbecue at his place or something like that. Is that an accurate retelling?
Fairly close, yeah. It was at my mother-in-law. So Mike lives 2 doors down from my mother-in-law. I'd moved up from Christchurch, which was where I studied, and met up with him there and was saying I was looking for a job. So he said, interview at JazzMax. He said, I'll help you get in. And
right.
New Zealand is a small place.
It really is. And I'm learning that a lot, even more, being on the academic side. Where did you study in Christchurch?
I studied at what is now ARA. So it was Christchurch Polytechnic at the time. So it's been through a few name changes from that to CPIT to now ARA. So, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so that was really so was JazzMax your first job in the industry, or did you move around a bit before landing there, or?
So my first job was actually working for James Hardie, and I was working on what was their Bondor panels. So yeah, quietly say that's where I worked. But through that, I've got 2 buildings down in Antarctica. So I did the shop drawings, and saw them being constructed in the factory, and they got shipped down to Antarctica. So that's kind of my claim to fame with working there. And then I worked at a couple of residential companies, one in Christchurch and one in Auckland, before finally landing at JazzMax.
Didn't manage to get a visit to Antarctica, did you, Mel?
Sorry?
Didn't manage to get a site visit to Antarctica, did you?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. Yeah. Still hoping, but
yeah, there's still time.
I don't think that'll come about.
Yeah. And then what drew you into this pathway under kind of BIM and digital transformation and technology? Was that sort of a natural progression, or was there something in that space that kind of piqued your interest and kind of pulled you in that direction?
I suppose it was probably more of a natural progression. So bringing Mike Foy back into the conversation, he was our CAD manager at JazzMax. I worked alongside him on developing standards, and then when we were in the AutoCAD days. And then just really kind of evolved when we were looking at a BIM platform or a modelling platform. We were looking at ArchiCAD, we were looking at Revit. So I kind of joined the team that were investigating that. And it just kind of evolved when Mike moved off to go and do his OE in Dubai. I kind of took up the reins along with Simon Whitbread when he was at JazzMax to implement Revit. So just evolved as the industry has changed and requirements have changed. Moved up that chain into the digital delivery lead at JazzMax. Another change happening this year. So.
Oh, right. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm taking on the head of knowledge and innovation at JazzMax when.
Right, awesome.
My current boss retires, so it's later on this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people that had either worked at JazzMax or do work at JazzMax, and they always talk about the K&I team and that system, and typically really highly of it. It seems to be very efficient and a good kind of quality check, which is awesome. I wish we had something like that, but.
Yeah, no, it seems to be one of its kind in the industry. We believe we're the only company that has that type of system in place, or that group where we're reviewing all of the projects from a technical side, sustainability, BIM, legal.
Yeah, I think a few have tried to replicate it, but not to the level of success. But Glenn, what about you? What did your kind of journey into the space look like?
It was an interesting one. So throughout my career, I've always said yes to opportunities, and I like to take you back to the start. So I started life as a structural drafter. So I finished school and did an apprenticeship in the UK, which was 2 years part-time going to college, which would be the equivalent of Polytech here in New Zealand, to learn structural drafting, a bit of kind of civil design. And there's been a few key moments in my career. So I guess the first one was the person who I would say was directly above me when I first started out. He left the company, and I'd gone from kind of being the general dog's body, folding drawings, doing standard detail sheets, that kind of thing, to hey, this guy's left. There's a 4-story hotel. Do you want to jump in and just kind of pick up the lead structural drafting on this? I thought, yeah, give it a go. Steep learning curve. Got shouted at lots of contractors for making mistakes. It was fun times. I moved to New Zealand in 2008, the first time, and quite funny, Mel. You say New Zealand's a smaller world. Simon Whitbread then was at Becker when I was working for Opus. So I joined Opus in 2008, I'd never used a 3D modelling tool before. I was 2D AutoCAD. And my manager at the time said, "Hey, our architects, they're using this thing called Revit. We need to learn to use it. Do you want to go on a training course?" So I got shipped up to Auckland. I was in Hamilton in the good old Tron back then. Went up to Auckland, did a Revit training course, got thrown into a project, and just kind of fumbled my way through. Fast forward a bit further, and I essentially picked up the role of helping Opus from a structural point of view, roll Revit out across their organisation in New Zealand and support in Australia. And I went back to the UK at a really pivotal time, I think. So I went back late 2010. It was actually September 2010. Flew out the day of the Christchurch earthquake, landed in Brisbane, looked on the news and was like, wow, that's just happened back in Christchurch. And I was with Opus in the UK, and it was a good time. I say that because the UK government in May 2011 launched their construction strategy, which was where BIM Level 2 stemmed from. And I spent probably the best part of 18 months, I would say, effectively going to conferences and being a sponge, right? The whole industry was having to change. There was a lot of education happening, and I got to travel around the country, attend various events, conferences, and really just learn, well, what is this BIM Level 2? What's it going to mean? It's 5 years away. It's been mandated in 2016. How do we get the company geared up to get to that point? And yeah, that stood me in good stead. Came back to New Zealand in January 2013. Took up a role with Becker on the structural side of things. So still in that kind of structural modelling, drafting kind of role. And then after a couple of years, I got an opportunity with AECOM in New Zealand. So I worked with, I'd say, some of the best minds in ANZ. Steve Appleby, Dave Foley, Toby Maple, Chris Needham. A bunch of them actually run a company called IMBI over in Australia. And that's when I got into this kind of BIM sort of consultancy advisory space, and I guess the rest is history from there. Went back to Becker kind of 4.5 years later, and here I am.
Yeah, awesome. So you spent a bit of time in the UK. How do you think our capabilities in this space in New Zealand are comparable to what you were seeing over in the UK, or do you think we've still got some room to grow here? Where do you think it's going in New Zealand?
Truthfully, I think in some aspects New Zealand's doing things a lot better than the UK, and I say that because there's a bit less focus on the red tape of the standards and the rigour of step by step go through this standard process. I think the UK has probably got a better handle on the whole of life value of BIM and information management. But New Zealand's doing some great stuff, and I'd say punching in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and I guess we'll get to it in a little bit of time, but I imagine part of BIMinNZ was to educate policymakers and government on ways they can implement BIM. But before we get to that, you've worked on some massive scale projects as well. Did you kind of see yourself heading down that pathway at the start, or was that something you kind of just naturally fell into?
A bit of both. I mean, I've always kind of been drawn to wanting to work on a large scale project, and like I don't do regrets, but I think the one thing in my career I slightly regret is I've not done a stint, say, in Singapore, right, to work on a one-off mega project. But always been drawn to those large projects.
Yeah, and obviously you two know each other, but when did you first meet, and when were you kind of first working together? Was it through a project, or was it more through the inception of what we're going to get to with BIMinNZ? Do you remember?
TC, can you know?
Yeah, it would have been the Revit Technology conferences, which were then turned to Built. Was probably when we first kind of crossed paths, and then through working together, I suppose, with projects. And then was at AECOM, and then moving across to Becker.
Oh, right. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I haven't heard the term RTC in forever.
A long time.
It's sort of forgotten. That was sort of before I was conference ready, I guess, but it was something that I'd always looked at and looked through the speaker list of these are the people I feel like I should need to know. But yeah, okay, well let's get into the guts of the episode, I guess. Take me back to the early days. So when did the idea of forming BIMinNZ or the BIM Acceleration Committee come from, and how did that kind of conversation really start?
Yeah, I guess I'll caveat this with me and Mel weren't there from the very, very beginning. So we've been involved in kind of the BIM handbook since the early days, but certainly not the BIM Acceleration Committee.
Right.
But looking back on this, and it was a long time ago, me and Mel had a quick conversation yesterday just to make sure that we both had the same recollection.
I love the homework, yeah.
So the Productivity Partnership was formed, I believe, around 2011 by the New Zealand government. So that was a collaboration between government agencies and industry, where they'd identified skill shortages, kind of low productivity, the regular sort of boom bust cycles. We have an industry that booms for a few years and then everyone's getting laid off, and then it booms for a few years and everyone's getting laid off. And they'd come together to essentially try and improve productivity in New Zealand, and they had this target of, I don't know where it came from, but it was 20% gain in productivity in the construction sector by 2020. Obviously, a lot happened around that time with COVID and the like.
Yes.
Mel, do you want to touch on the kind of BIMinNZ form, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, you can carry on. I'll chime in when I can. Yeah.
So around about 2014, 2013, the BIM Acceleration Committee was formed. So that was obviously prior to the BIMinNZ title. There was a group called the National Technical Standards Committee. So that group was developing open standards, particularly around data. So you might have, I think they were tasked with the Three Waters metadata standards, and there was the I think it was residential and light commercial construction metadata standards. So the BIM Acceleration Committee was sort of an offshoot of that. It was sponsored by MB and Brands, and it had a clear kind of goal and mandate, which was to accelerate the adoption of BIM use in New Zealand. And I think it's worth just giving a shout out to some of those founding members. So there was Andrew Redding, who I believe at the time was the previous chief exec of Fletcher Construction. Pretty sure that was his role.
Yeah.
John Williams, who was a general manager at Becker. There was Dave Hunter, who was quite senior at Fletcher's, and members of MB, and a bunch of others. People find this if you jump on Google and just put in the Productivity Partnership or BIM Acceleration Committee. You can see the original list of members there. And Steve Davis from Assemble, I think he joined a little bit later, but he was one of the key sort of driving forces behind the BIM handbook in the early days.
Yeah, so if I understand this right, they came to you and you sort of joined a committee then, as opposed to what I kind of imagined was people sitting around having a beer and going, we should build something.
You mean in terms of me and Mel, or you mean in terms of the committee being formed?
I mean in terms of the original BIM Acceleration Committee.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure exactly how the conversation happened, but my suspicion would be that the Productivity Partnership had been formed to look at productivity gains in the country. New Zealand was probably looking at the UK government 2011 construction strategy and going, well, these guys think that this BIM thing is going to bring about some efficiencies. We should probably have a look at that. That would be my take, but certainly to anyone listening, don't quote me on that. I don't know if you've got any other insights.
No, I was going to say the same thing. I think all of those movements happening in the UK was definitely what I would consider to be the driving force behind the evolving of the BIM Acceleration Committee from the Productivity Partnership.
Yeah. So then I'll go to you first, Mel. how did the two of you come to be involved?
So it probably started with the BIM handbook. There are a group of people who kind of got brought in to have a look at what it would mean to have a standard in New Zealand. NatSpec were involved. They had been writing one in Australia, and we kind of grouped together. So it would have been what 2014 was the first evolution of the handbook. So Glenn and I were quite heavily involved in reviewing that content and inputting into it. So I think we're up to version 4 now. But that was probably my first time being part of the BIM Acceleration Committee, kind of on the edges. I wasn't actually a member, but starting to input into some of the initiatives that they were working on, with that key one being the handbook.
Right. And is that the same for you, Glenn?
Mine's a little bit different. So I rocked up to Becker, as I said, in January 2013, and all excited about this BIM thing. I just been kind of acting like a sponge in the UK for a few years, and I was kind of saying, well, what's going on in New Zealand? How can I get involved? How can I help? And within Becker, through the channels, I eventually got directed to John Williams. As I said, he was very senior at the time at Becker. I think he was a general manager. He's retired now. Good friend of mine. He's been a really good mentor. He probably didn't think that at the time though, because I essentially picked up the phone and said, John, I understand you're part of this BIM acceleration group. I want to be involved. How do I get involved? I was knocking on his door for weeks and weeks and weeks, and eventually he probably got sick of this. This young Englishman knocking on his door and said, right, I'll get you involved. You can be involved in the BIM handbook. But I just had a passion for it and thought I had some knowledge to offer. And yeah, that was kind of how it started.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. With your experience overseas, it would have, from my perspective, makes perfect sense. Is the final product kind of what you had imagined in your mind when it was being built, or did it sort of change over time as you started to develop it more?
I mean, I guess the very first version, so as Mel mentioned, it was developed by NatSpec the first iteration was developed by NatSpec in Australia, who developed the NatSpec BIM guidance documents. And that went out to a public consultation in New Zealand. There was a workshop up in Auckland, and there would have been 50 people maybe in this room.
Easily.
Myself and Mel were obviously there. There's a bunch of people there. And the overwhelming feedback was that it was a fantastic piece of work, but New Zealand, Kiwis being Kiwis, number 8 wire and all that, the industry wanted something that was uniquely New Zealand. So that first version was taken. I think Steve Davis at the time kind of took the lead role on that and brought in a few key people, and it was tweaked to be Kiwiized, I guess. And it's evolved a lot since then. I mean, Mel led the most recent iteration, and I think we've got a fantastic asset there, not just for New Zealand, but internationally. I've had some great feedback from overseas on the BIM handbook.
Yeah, it's hugely popular. You could just Google the BIMinNZ handbook or search it up on YouTube, and I found recently creators or people in our profession but in other parts of the world going through it and teaching it in different languages, which I found really interesting. So it's been referenced all around the world, which surprised me, but it's something to be proud of for sure. At some point during all of this, there was the BIM Acceleration Committee, but at some point BIMinNZ, as we know it today, kind of started to form. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like and how that came to be?
So I can probably pick up a little bit on that one, Jack.
Yeah.
So as part of the BIM Acceleration Committee, I was really looking at how we can create a community. Most of the regions had, well, definitely Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch had the Revit user groups, which were being attended by many people to look at how they actually use the tool. And I think it was, Ben and I were talking about it yesterday, I think it was Christchurch who made the first step to go, well, hey, let's make these Revit regular meetings that we're having more BIM focused. So they changed their name from the Christchurch Revit user group to the BIM user group, or BIMinNZ. And I think at that time, with the handbook evolution and Steve Davis's kind of industry role and kind of getting the regional, kind of trying to get an uptake and experience and knowledge shared, looked at how we could change and form the regional groups. So making sure we're all talking the same language. So that's probably where the BIMinNZ regional groups came from. And then that kind of just evolved with becoming the BIM Acceleration Committee. We were at a point where we had the handbook out. Adoption and maturity was beginning to lift. I wouldn't say that we'd made the 20% by 2020, but it was more around creating that community. And by having it as a BIMinNZ rather than BIM Acceleration Committee, we kind of felt that name suited it better to try and get engagement.
Yeah, it's certainly at this point a recognisable name, and it's softer, it's more approachable.
It is.
I remember in my early days going to those what we call Rugwell in Wellington that eventually turned into BIMWell, and so I kind of remember that transition and really enjoying those kind of early talks. I think JazMax hosted a few. I remember one about Unify in content creation years ago. And, back at my old company, we hosted a few. And I did enjoy seeing that audience kind of grow and start to zone on very specific things that kind of died down a little bit in Wellington just before COVID. But I think it was pretty strong all the way through in Christchurch, Glenn, if I remember right, with Keeley at the helm and others. I feel like you guys had a really strong, consistent momentum.
Christchurch was pretty good. I think that one of the key things around the shift from those Revit use groups to the kind of BIM focus is it really opened it up to clients, contractors, asset owners. It sparked their interest. And yeah, Christchurch did have good momentum for quite some time.
Yeah, I remember there were two anecdotes from the Christchurch ones that I remember hearing about it secondhand, because I only got to my first Christchurch BIMinNZ earlier this year. But you guys did some slightly out of the ordinary topics. I think you did BIM speed dating at some point.
I don't recall that one, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I remember hearing that Keeley ended one of his talks with a literal mic drop.
Yeah, one of the things that I think did work well is Keeley's surname's Pomeroy. There's a famous pub in Christchurch called Pomeroy's, and he actually got kegs of beer from his sister's brewery for the event. So it was a bring your own glass. And that always seemed to attract the crowd, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, I find that within New Zealand, although the mainstream adoption might have some room to grow, that there are these small pockets, or probably medium-sized pockets now, of like real excellent work in this space, and key people behind that. I think Christchurch seems to be one of the major centres where that's really happening, and that I wonder if that's partly to do with the Christchurch rebuild, or if it's just all of the talent moved down there because of all the work or something. Do you have any thoughts into why Christchurch seemed to kind of be a place where all of these key people sort of developed really quickly and formed into the kind of leaders that they are now?
You've got to say the rebuild's a big part of it. The investment, that what the final number was, it was in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s of billions or something like that. The overall investment in the rebuild. Big projects brings in different people, different companies. There's obviously been a lot of migration into Christchurch to fill the people power gap and the skill shortage to deliver these projects, and then with that migration also comes knowledge. So I think that's probably quite a key part of it. And I guess that community that you both mentioned previously, bringing together a community that's open to kind of sharing knowledge and trying to to grow everyone, because if we're all on a level playing field, then we're heading in the right direction as New Zealand Inc. So that probably plays a part as well.
Yeah. All right. So going back to the handbook, then there's a point where the first version is complete and it's rolled out, it's published. When was that, and what was that like? I imagine that was it felt like quite an achievement to have something that you could issue nationwide and get feedback on.
So the first one was 2014, July 2014, I think, was the first kind of fall issue. If I'm being honest, I don't remember too much about it. I remember writing sections and kind of inputting into it, and then it gets published. And look, I think overall the feedback from the industry was positive. It was created with input from industry. So everyone, well, not everyone, but a large part of the industry felt like they owned a piece of the handbook, I guess, which really helps when you're trying to enact change.
Yeah, I still remember, and I think I've still got it here somewhere. Jason Howden actually handing me the first printed version of it in like book form, and that felt like a real achievement, like something that you could hold that was created right here and reflects us. So I'll always remember that. And yeah, I think it's just on my shelf over there, but I found that really awesome. How about you, Mel? What was your thought when this thing went out for everyone to see?
You're probably similar to what you just said there, Jake. Actually having something that you could hold and see that, and it was a great reference document for the industry and beginning that maturity uptake. I honestly still feel that it was, whilst it was needed, it was definitely needed for the industry. I think some parties were not ready for it. Some, you could probably say, people are still not ready for what BIM is, and that it's not just a tool. But it was definitely, it was that first step. I think we tried to, the original one came out in 2014. The next one was in 2016. And Glenn, you'll have to remind me, when was the road show? So did the BIM 101, was that between 2016 and 19? I'm trying to think if it was okay.
It was there or thereabouts. I'd need to do a quick Google or dig into my presentation history.
I think there was still, it was great to have that guidance, but people were still struggling with how they put it into practice. Not everybody was on the same platform. Whilst we all understand that's not a barrier, but it was seen as that at the time. We've got this great industry guidance, but how do we adopt it internally? How do we upskill those at that leadership level to understand it? There's a certain level of people within every company and within the industry who understood what this was about, but how do we communicate that to leadership, and then how do we apply it to our consultants that we're trying to bring along on that journey, which is, I think, where the 2016 one came into play. And then obviously that 101 training that was done in a roadshow.
Yeah, so
September 2016 is when the BIM 101 Insights document was published. So yeah, I guess between those two issues.
There's still a series of BIM 101 videos on the website as well, which I think get referenced quite often.
Yeah, they'd be cringeworthy to watch back now, I think.
It's always cringeworthy watching yourself or listening to yourself. Try running a podcast.
It was extremely successful, right? So that the BIM 101, there was, as part of the BIM Acceleration Committee, there was a bunch of offshoot groups. It was obviously the BIM Handbook group, and then there was what was called the BIM Industry Training Group, and that was led by Dennis Burns, who was a director at Arc House at the time. Mm-hmm. And BIM 101 was effectively his idea. Let's roll out a seminar series. It was a half-day seminar, and let's go through, kind of 45-minute, 1 hour sort of module sessions to step people through this process from, establishing requirements to implementing in projects, standards, etc., etc. And that was rolled out in Auckland, Taronga, pretty sure Wellington, in fact definitely Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, possibly Queenstown as well. It was attended by about 1,000 people across the country, so it was a big uptake, and a really, successful kind of piece of work at its time.
Yeah. Mel, you'd mentioned versions 2 and versions 3 and so on. Can you talk a little bit about the need to iterate on this document and keep it live? Was that to keep up with international standards, or was that reflecting feedback from the industry here in New Zealand? Like what drove those iterations?
Probably everything you've just said there, Jake. The maturity within the local community within New Zealand itself. That understanding now that we had contractors who were wanting to use it, so we needed to be able to apply it to how they would incorporate their use cases. Also with the ISO 19650, with the information standard, we incorporated that in version 3, so that became referenced. We then looked at how we would be communicating more to clients. So that became a big focus. So at that front end, information requirements with your client, and then at the back end, what it would be used for, one by the contractor to deliver on that, and then in terms of facilities. So that would have been version 3. And then the latest version that we put out in for 2022, 23. I'm lost on years these days.
I think it was 23.
Yeah, it might have been December 23. That there was really incorporating ISO 19650 into it. We had quite a lot of feedback from the community. They were wanting to understand how that would be applied to New Zealand projects. And we spent a lot of time going through and mapping that out. That was probably an area that Glenn kind of owned, was mapping out that process for 19650. So that was the key driver for that change.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with contractors kind of increasing their willingness to work in that digital space. I know that they're quite driven by ISO 19650. Makes perfect sense, really, doesn't it? And I think, Glenn, if I'm right, Becca were the first 19650 accredited company in New Zealand. Have I got that right?
I think Oricon beat us to it.
Oh, did they?
So I think we were second.
Second, still in the top 5.
Still in the top there. Yeah, look, it was. I mean, that was important to me to get that across the line for the company, just to make sure everyone's kind of managing information the same way. And that last BIM handbook update that would have been the most significant, right, Mel? That was. I mean, it wasn't a full rewrite, but it was basically a full rewrite of the document.
It certainly was. Yeah.
Again, positive feedback so far.
Yeah, and then in and around all of that, there's all these other documents as well that were produced. Like I think there's a value case for digital first, which is a really popular document. So was that all kind of developed by the same key group and with the same funders, or was that kind of a separate piece?
Look, it was all part of the BIMinNZ, so we've kind of evolved the BIM Acceleration Committee to more of the BIMinNZ. There were some different parties that came into that group. People had stepped back. So there was a real drive for understanding what that value was for adoption of BIM, within the information process from a client perspective, and how would you communicate that. So that was driven and written by Andrew Field and Kerry Niven from Oricon. Obviously Andrew's from Becca, and bringing in that industry information of how people can adopt it and how they can use it, really understanding that value. And that was written at the same time as that last update to the handbook.
Yeah, I remember that coming out and being really intrigued by it and trying to get it in front of the people that I felt like really needed to read it.
Yeah.
So all of this work kind of culminates in a BIMinNZ conference in 2021, and I was going back the other day and just familiarizing myself with the lineup, and there's a lot of familiar faces there. But can you talk about what made you want to do a conference and how it all went?
So I actually think the first conference was in 2019.
Oh, right. No,
Yeah.
you are right.
We appreciate COVID has messed up people's timelines.
Yes, of course. Yeah. No, you're right. 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would have been about May, June 2019 that we had that conference. It was in Wellington, and it aligned with when we were releasing version 3 of the handbook. And the idea was to take people through that life cycle journey of how the information can be passed through and how it's used by each area. And it was to really prove to the industry that we were adopting, we were moving, and that people saw real great value in this. So it was really trying to bring leaders within the industry. So, those who were actually putting it into practice. We leaned on some industry, some international speakers on that one as well. I think we had a chap from Denver Airport came over for that one. And I think it was quite timely in hindsight with COVID hitting in 2020 that we really got that information out so people could really understand that it was a real thing. I think that's probably what we were grappling with at the time, is people were going, yeah, this is really great, but how is it used in practice? Give us some examples. How does that information flow through from the beginning to the end?
It was almost, again, it was led by Dennis Burns, and it was a kind of a spin-off of the BIM Industry Training Group. So BIM 101 was the Industry Training Part 1, and the aspiration was to have, I think they called it BIM 102 or BIM 201, which was essentially a online sandpit environment where people could go in. It was quite aspirational. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to achieve it, but where people could go in and kind of work through a project. If my memory serves me right, I think around that sort of time, the acceleration committee may have been starting to, I guess, wind down a little bit, I think. And that's when the focus shifted from, okay, we don't think we can get this kind of BIM sandpit area up and running, but we could run a conference. So Dennis partnered with NZIOB to kind of help manage that, and got industry sponsorship from various organisations, and huge success. Again, big numbers attended the conference, and there's with the built conferences, what previously was RTC, kind of not really taking place anymore. There's, from my point of view, there's a gap there. There's an opportunity for something like that, in New Zealand to keep going ahead, to keep sharing this knowledge.
Yeah, we think so, and certainly with so many organisations in New Zealand that are all kind of moving in the same direction, Women in BIM, the Institute of Building Aotearoa, like there's certainly some combined might that can kind of help champion these things and bring them to life. So I think you're right there. That's great. Must have been nerve-wracking though. There must be a point at which it moves from a failure to a success. So it's probably a little bit of grey in the middle, but were you ever worried that you were biting off more than you could chew, or were you pretty confident from the get-go because you had the support of other industry bodies?
I was confident because we had Mel there, who's been an expert at running conferences in the past.
Yeah.
It's always nerve-wracking, right? When you're bringing something out to the industry. This is the first one that we've done. Will people come? Will they find it of value? But I think the feedback that we got from the conference was that it was very valuable, and that it was a great success. We had well over 300 people there at Te Papa for the conference venue. And I think the fact that we had curated the content so well to ensure that people would get value out of it made it a great success. And it was from that kind of structure and that kind of value that we needed to continue those conferences, particularly after COVID, bringing the community back together. And as Glenn's mentioned, the Built ANZ conference that usually happens in Australia, that was a bit more of a blended conference where you could learn more around the tools, but you also saw the use cases and how people were adopting and adapting change within their businesses. Those, unfortunately, are no longer happening. So there's a real gap within the industry at the moment in both countries to look at how we continue to embrace and share that knowledge. And that's one great thing about New Zealand, is that whilst we might work for competing companies, we're still wanting to share information. Becca and JazMax aren't necessarily competing. We work and collaborate quite closely together, but we are a very sharing nation. We want to make sure that everybody is able to advance themselves. Obviously, there's certain things that you don't want to share, but that's just your competitive advantage. But the fact that we can have people from from Ignite or Ranamani and JazMax speaking at a conference and sharing their knowledge is a great thing.
Yeah, I think it was at the last Built in Melbourne where Gavin from Aussie BIM Guru from Architectus said on stage, our managers would lose their mind if they knew how much we share amongst one another at these conferences. But I think he presented it in a good way. It's like, you want to share, it's the high tide raises all boats kind of situation where sharing your knowledge grows the entire industry, and that's good for the industry and therefore good for you. So
and that's what the industry needs. So
well, it sounds like there's an opportunity there for more things like that in New Zealand and Australia, as you mentioned. So maybe people listening might have an idea and try to bring something to market. Glenn, you touched on this really briefly, but you talked about the BIM Acceleration Committee starting to kind of wind down in the early 2020s, which ultimately led to, I think at the start of last year, handing over BIMinNZ as an entity essentially to a new group to manage. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Like, was it just that when you started, you're kind of coming up in your career and now you're all principals and very busy and struggling to find time, or did you just feel like it was time for a new set of ideas to kind of take it a new direction? Like, what drove the decision to ultimately hand BIMinNZ over?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was probably, I think everyone in the group was aligned. A few people may or may not wanted to kind of stick around, but my opinion with any of these things, whether it's a school board, a company board, or a conference committee, is that there needs to be constant refresh, right? Because people get comfortable, people run out of ideas, people get busy, and there's younger, more enthusiastic, there's people that have got some really clever ideas and just need a platform. So I think it's really, really important for these groups to evolve. I think the group at the time, which was obviously the BIMinNZ committee, post BIM Acceleration Committee, it's essentially been running on goodwill and time in kind alongside people's day jobs. Work on an evening, work on a weekend. And I think we thought, there's the regional BIM groups, there's some great people in those groups, some people with good ideas. How do we recreate the connection between the people on the ground in those regions, in those groups that are doing all the great work? How do we recreate that connection back to how we're driving BIM in New Zealand? And we just decided, let's see if they want to take charge. Let's see if they want to pick up the reins and run with this. So we'd had a number of conversations about it, and then I think we reached out to the essentially chairs of each of those BIM groups and just said, look, what do you guys think? And it's been fantastic to see the early momentum that's for example, this podcast, right? didn't exist previously. So it's been fantastic to see new ideas, and I'm really excited to see where you guys take this.
Yeah, thanks. It's it was really exciting to be able to really think about it and think about what it looks like in the context of 2025 and 2026 and how people consume ideas and exchange ideas post-COVID. I think everything's moved online, and I think the importance of actual in-person get-togethers is more important than even it was in the 20-teens. So that's really exciting, but also, what other engagement points can we have that kind of invite people in? And so this is an idea that we're testing. We'll see how far it goes, but and there will be other ideas, and it's really about presenting more open doors that people can come through and find their way to BIMinNZ and ultimately to those community events. And then what happens next after that, we will see. But part of our terms of reference is that we are going to continue to cycle in new people on I think 2-year intervals is what we identified, because those idea refreshes and that new energy and that new blood is really important as well. Mel, looking back on this, what must be 10 or 12 years worth of BIMinNZ and BIM Acceleration Committee and growing the industry, do you have any reflections? Is there anything that you're particularly proud of during that time span?
Look, I think there's two things that we've kind of touched on today. I'm really proud of the efforts that we did around the BIM handbook. I think, that was, as you said, it's been a grounding document for New Zealand that's been referenced internationally. So pretty proud to have my name associated with that, and also the BIMinNZ, kind of the banner on that one. So providing that shared language to the industry to be able to grow and move forward on it. I don't see version 4 being the last version. I'm sure the committee have got ideas on what else it can be adapted and added to it. So always keen to kind of do a review. So I don't really want to step completely away from it. So I think that's been a really good high point for me. But also just being involved in creating that community. So with the regional groups and bringing people together, that's, being able to have that conversation has proven a highlight to see how we can collaborate more efficiently, more effectively, and share our message through the ones, I would say.
Yeah, wonderful. How about you, Glenn? Any reflections?
I mean, Mel said the two things that immediately came to my mind. But I think what I'll add to that is, a lot of people have contributed to the BIM handbook over the years, and there's too many names to mention. But every single one of those individuals should be equally as proud. Everyone's contributed to that to make it what it is. So yeah, the handbook and again the community that Mel just mentioned.
Yeah. All right. Look, I've got a couple of little wrap-up questions that I like to ask people that come on the show. But what are you excited about going forward? Where do you see the industry going? I know this is a really big wrap-up question, but what things do you see coming about in the future that you're really excited to be a part of, or see how they affect our industry?
Me, and it's somewhat of a generic, a bit of a broad response. So there's a number of really significant kind of projects and pieces of work underway in New Zealand at the moment. Whether that be just big major projects, or whether that be smaller projects where there's innovation around, say, the asset handover side of things, like digital twins and the like. I'm excited to see the outcomes of these projects. I'm excited to see the case studies and the success stories told. The key word is if these stories are allowed to be told. If the clients and the project teams allow these stories to be told, then I think we might see quite a big shift in New Zealand, because I think what's been missing somewhat is is that proof of the benefits and the value, or at least that local proof. The BIM Acceleration Committee had a number of case studies, but again, I don't think there's been a case study written since pre-COVID from memory. So I think for me that's a big one. If we can demonstrate the value across the whole life cycle of those assets, and we're backing it up with real world examples that are New Zealand examples, I think we'll see a big shift.
Yeah, I think there might be something in the works. There's certainly a good handful of projects that would be great case studies that have hit completion post 2020. How about you, Mel? Is there anything in particular that you're excited about?
Glenn mentioned it a little bit earlier. I'm excited about where BIMNZ is going next, to evolve and to create that community, to get that message out there. I'm really excited about and really intrigued to see what happens and how we can grow that message. Or could stop saying the we part. How that message can be grown and shared, and whether it's through case studies, whether it's through another conference, through this podcast. But I'm also intrigued, it's probably more of a personal one, is around how automation is going to change some of our work processes, and whether that's going to have a major effect on the industry. Purposely didn't say AI, because I think that's more focused, it's around automation.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? I think I was reading a book the other day that said that only 5% of projects come in on time and on budget, which means 95% don't. And so there's some opportunity for some real efficiency gains with the way we use technology, and I think automation plays a big part in that. So I'm excited. I will also say you'll always be able to say we, Mel. You're not going to be a stranger, and we'll keep you both involved as much as you let us. Part of BIMinNZ is about building community. Your roles as leaders are, in a large part, mentorship. What advice would you give to young people that are pursuing a role in construction technology or digital innovation or digital engineering? Is there anything you'd suggest for someone that's listening to this that's maybe in their first 2 years of their career and is wondering where their career might take them?
Say yes to opportunities. I think say yes to an opportunity, even if you aren't sure whether you can fully meet the requirements of that opportunity, because that'll give you a big opportunity to learn and grow. And I think something that we don't focus enough on is the development of soft skills. In this space, we focus a lot on the kind of technology, but being able to have a conversation, explain why, deal with people and behaviours is really, really important.
Yeah, I'd have to agree on that soft skills one thing. You took that one out from my list. If we're able to communicate clearly and we're able to communicate, we're able to collaborate, and that's probably a key one. So it's looking at those soft skills and bringing those early. Don't leave them until your last year before you move out. The other one I would probably look at is actually understanding, for those who are looking at becoming BIM managers or looking at that kind of process, is understand construction. It doesn't matter if you're an architect or if you're an engineer. Understand that construction process, and identify areas that will be of concern later on, not just in the moment that you're trying to model and document. So that's probably a couple of key ones for me. But the final one would be engage in the community. We've got a great community here. Engage and step up, and that's by bringing in the new committee, by bringing in the energetic and enthusiastic people. It's just making sure that they're engaging in it.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, speaking of engaging with community, are you open to people if someone wanted to reach out and ask you a question or invite you to a coffee? Is that the kind of thing you're open to encouraging? And if so, where can people find you or get in contact with you? aside from coming to a BIMinNZ event, which you'll undoubtedly be at.
Look, absolutely open to anyone reaching out. Business email, so melanie.tristram@jazzmax, or LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably easiest, to be honest. So yeah, reach out at any time.
Yeah. Likewise, you can find me on LinkedIn, glenn.jowett@becker.com.
Yeah, great. And Mel, are you still involved in Women in BIM and as a mentor, or?
Yes, I am still involved with Women in BIM. Not a mentor currently. Haven't put my hand up for this year just with the role change happening. But yeah, definitely involved with the local regional events. We've actually got a regional committee meeting this afternoon. So really looking at how we can engage with Women in BIM this year.
Yeah, so many committee meetings. But yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, look, thank you for your time. It's been awesome to talk to you both and get a bit of the history around how this group came to be, hear your stories. I know you're really busy and you've got a lot to do, so thank you for your time. And for everyone out there that's listening, also thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Jack.
Thanks for having us, Jack.